What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you a full in-depth guide for new players in Path of Exile 2. In this guide you will discover the most efficient strategies to level up quickly, then how does the most mechanics and activities work in the game, like for example how does the passive skill tree work, then how to find and farm the best items and skills, then also what are gems, then what are all 12 currencies and how to use them, and much more. Overall, POE 2 is a very complex game with slow progression, but by following the steps and tricks, you will be able to navigate through the whole experience much more faster and easier. And now finally, let me show you the best tips and tricks for the passive skill tree. As for most players, this can seem extremely daunting. So to start off, one important concept to understand is the attributes. In Path of Exile 2, we have Strength, which are red, Dexterity, which are green, and Intelligence, that are blue. These attributes generally align with the certain types of skills, so Strength for more heavy hitting melee attacks, then Dexterity for faster forms of ranged combat, and then finally Intelligence for more spell-based or summoning style skills. So now let's take a look at the passive skill tree. A character is granted one passive skill point every time they level up, and sometimes they are even granted more from completing certain quests. And don't worry, because you can change these points around by spending gold at the Hooded One, or with the Orbs of Regret, but respecting your points is not cheap, so I recommend to follow one of my build guides for the most efficient setup. But with that said, here we have the attribute areas. This is just a rough overview of how the passive tree is segmented by passive and attribute type. In extremely simple terms, at the top we have the intelligence section, which focuses on spell damage, summoning and elemental damage. Then we have the bottom right, which is dexterity section, and it's more focused on ranged combat, evasion and speed. And then finally we have the bottom left, which is the strength section, and this is more melee and defense oriented. Then next we have the passive nodes, and they're split into two categories. The small passives, aka the blue squares, are the small points that grant minor bonuses, such as small increases to attack speed, spell damage, melee damage or attributes. And then second we have notable passives, aka the red squares. These are slightly larger passive points that grant greater bonuses than the small passives, but they have stats on them that are often closely related to the small passives leading up to them. So think of these as the checkpoints to work towards. And then on top of this, we have the third passive point, which is not entirely compared to the blue and red squares. So the third point are the keystones, that are build-changing, character-defining points that often provide a massive amount of power, but with a downside. These downsides can be reduced or worked around, but keystones are the core of your character building in PoE 2. So for example, we have the Giant's Blood keystone. It reads that you can wield a two-handed melee weapon in just one hand, but weapon requirements are doubled. So now that you know what a keystone is, what's the next step? Well, let's say that you're level 20. You've taken a few good notable passive points, then now your next step should be to look at any nearby keystone, to see if any might be good for you. If you're a ranger with tons of accuracy already, who doesn't care about critical strikes, then heading over to the precise technique might be the best damage boost that you're looking for. Usually my train of process is to find out the keystone that I want to get first. Then second, look for the best path to reach the keystone, and what good notable passives are along the way. And then finally, where I should go after getting those points. Although bear in mind that you don't have to take any keystones if none fit your build, and most builds often don't take more than a couple of keystones. But by using keystones and notable points as checkpoints, or just the guiding lights, will make the otherwise overwhelming passive tree a bit more digestible. Throughout your time in PoE 2, you will find currency items that allow you to upgrade your gear. Orbs of Alchemy can be used to make normal items into rare with 4 modifiers, which can often be the difference between success and failure. Having a powerful weapon upgrade before a boss fight can have a huge impact on not only your build's performance but also on how much you're having fun. Currency in Path of Exile 2 has several functions, so crafting, trading, as well as possibly paying for certain services that you will find later in the game. Currency orbs are found as natural drops from the slaying monsters, with bosses having a higher chance to drop more of a rare currency type. You can also disenchant items at certain vendors to gain currency shards, which will combine into a full orb when you have enough shards. While leveling and fighting certain bosses during the campaign, it will be guaranteed that you will get useful low-level currency, so make sure that you are doing optional side bosses too, for that extra loot which will become more useful in the endgame. And before you get into currencies, you will need to understand what each one does. So here is my quick summary. First, the Orb of Transmutation is primarily used in the initial stage of crafting, but can be used early during the campaign to upgrade normal items to the magic ones. Next, we have the Orb of Augmentation, which are used to add an additional modifier to a magic item, usually after using the Orb of Transmutation first. Third, the Orb of Alchemy is mainly used to have a chance to create a good rare item, with at least 4 modifiers. Then next we have the Orb of Chance, which can provide an opportunity to land an upgrade for an item by transforming it into a magic item. Then fifth, the Chaos Orbs can be used as a gamble to massively improve an item. For example, if you have 2 good modifiers and 2 bad modifiers, then using a Chaos Orb has a chance to remove 1 bad modifier to replace it with a good one. Then sixth, the Regal Orb upgrades a magic item to a rare item with an additional modifier. They're more common than other currencies, so that makes them more useful. Then next we have the Orbs of Annulment, which are advanced crafting currency that are used to remove a random modifier from an item. Then next we have the Exalted Orb, that adds a random modifier to a rare item and is also much more common compared to other currencies. Then next we have the Divine Orb, which is an advanced currency that can be used to randomize the values on items to possibly improve them. Then 10th we have the Veil's Orb, which are reserved for the final step of a crafting process, as by using it will apply the corrupted tag to the item, which prevents any further changes from being made to it. Then next we have the Mirror of the Calandra, which creates a copy of another non-unique item. This currency is extremely rare, so I recommend to not use them but sell instead. And finally we have the Jeweler's Orb. This will add a socket to a skill gem with 2 sockets. Then my next tip is that you need to utilize the dual specialization. So POE 2 has introduced a new core game mechanic, where unlike in other games where a player is limited to just one build or one playstyle, then now basically you get 2 different skill sets and loadouts to work with. The dual specialization system works in 2 main ways. First, a character will gain access to a limited number of special passive points. With these points, essentially you have 2 different passive trees. And second, skills can be set to either of your weapon loadout. Your character will automatically swap between your first or second weapon and use the skills set to it. The act of weapon swapping is automatic, and you only need to press your skill like normal. There is of course a small delay when switching weapons, so you may want to set some skills to both weapons if there's no difference. Just keep in mind that your character won't switch if the set is to both, but will only switch for other skills. I personally like to use it with my sorceress, as by using the dual specialization tree, I can allocate points to both lightning and cold damage, and as I weapon swap, the tree fitting my skill gem is automatically being used. Also, if you look at the bottom right, you can see the number 1 and 2 with a check mark. This allows you to set each skill to a particular weapon set. All characters are able to utilize this dual specialization system, and you can use it in a variety of ways as well. You can use the system to simply buff your character, create different undead armies with your witch, or perhaps just swap between single and AoE setups. Then for my next step, let's take a look at the skill gems, and where and when should you spend them. So Path of Exile's 2 skill system is different from what you might be used to. Unlike other ARPGs, skills in POE 2 are items which can be socketed into your skill gem page, which means that these skills are not limited to class, so all classes can use any skill. Overall we have 5 gem types, and we will quickly cover each one, and then at the end I will explain the best utilization for them. So first we have the active skill gems. Active skill gems, or just skill gems, give you access to various attacks that are ranged, melee, just normal spells or summoning skills. You can find these throughout the campaign in the form of an uncut skill gem, which can be then engraved to select a skill of your choice. In POE 2, all classes have access to 9 active skill gem sockets, which can be then used as you please. Skill gems can also be further modified by support gems, which I will cover in just a second. So then second we have the support gems, and they can modify or enhance your skill gems, but don't provide new abilities themselves. These gems must be socketed into sockets alongside the skill gem to function. In POE 2, each character starts with 2 sockets besides each skill gem socket, and this can be extended up to 5 support sockets per skill through the use of the Jeweler's Orbs, which you will find throughout your adventure. For example, you might use a fireball skill and then find a support such as the multiple projectiles. If you link this with your fireball, then your fireballs will shoot out an extra 2 fireballs per cast, with the downside being that each one will do slightly less damage. You could also link this with the pierce support, meaning that your 3 fireballs now will fly through enemies, allowing them to hit even more. Then third we have the buff gems. This is a special type of gem that grants persistent buffs or temporary buffs to your character, nearby allies and or minions. These buffs stay active until manually turned off, and reserve spirit to keep active. Persistent buffs are skills that increase your damage, defenses, or have other useful effects. An example is the Arctic Armor, which summons an icy barrier around you that gains stages over time that absorb incoming hits that deal fire or physical damage. Or then the temporary buffs provide a short-term, powerful effect, but require activation, often on a cooldown. Next we have the Uncut Gems. These are the gems that will give you a choice of which gem you want. They can also be used to increase the level of your active skill gems. By clicking this Uncut Gem, it will take you to the engraving window, where you have a choice of a gem based on the level of the Uncut Gem. The choices that are offered are often limited and linked to your character's class, making the choice more simpler for newer players. And finally we have the Meta Gems. These are more complex gems that trigger an effect when certain conditions are met. The Meta Gems reserve spirit and make use of an energy mechanic, where meeting a condition generates energy, and reaching maximum energy triggers the effect. An example is the cast on a shock, so you will gain 20 energy when you shock an enemy, with a hit from a skill once per skill use. So now in my conclusion, mastering the skill gem system can seem overwhelming at first, but once you understand how to match the skill gems with the right support gems, and how buff and meta gems can further enhance your character, then you will unlock countless of build possibilities. So in PoE 2 there are a number of known ways to scale damage, and these can be divided into 4 main categories. The first one is your DPS scaling, which is tied to the monster. An example is that the monster suffers more damage because it is shocked. Then second we have scaling that is tied to a player. An example is that a player allocates a specific node into the passive tree, which reads 29% increase to a chaos damage. Or perhaps you turn on the buff Archmage, which reads spells gain 5% of the damage as lightning damage for each 100% maximum mana you have. Then third we have the avoiding failed actions. An example is that you cast a spell, but monster's hit inflicts a stun while they are casting it, causing the spell to fail. Another player fires a projectile, but the intended target isn't in the right place when the projectile gets to it. So another player makes an attack, but has insufficient accuracy, and so the monster evades it. And finally we have increasing time spent attempting to deal damage. An example is that the player's high movement speed allows them to dodge a deadly boss attack rapidly and to get back to dealing damage. However, another player's investment into fire resistance and life leech allows them to stand in the fire consistently, attacking and never once stopping to move. So what we can take from all of these examples? In PoE 2, you will usually focus on one type of damage on many builds, to maximize the options for increased damage modifiers on the passive tree. Also, a spell that deals cold damage and gains a percentage of damage as the extra cold damage is easier to scale than mixing bunch of elements together. The same applies to weapons. This means that you cannot circumvent the need for good weapons and high-level spell gems simply by stacking the flat damage stats. Some skills don't need much damage, but can make the next skill you use do more damage, such as the breaking monster armor. So always ask yourself, is it worth firing one weak skill to empower several following ones? The answer is usually no against weak monsters, and yes otherwise, so make your build around this thought in mind. Leveling in Path of Exile 2 will demand careful planning and efficiency, especially as you approach higher levels. By using group play, leveraging efficient farming strategies, and continuously upgrading your gear, you can minimize the grind and reach level 100 much faster than if you were just attempting the journey alone. However, both of them have their advantages and disadvantages. So for example, if you choose to solo level, then you can level at your own pace without the reliance on others. You can also complete most activities without requiring to wait or coordinate with other players. You also gain more loot per player while during leveling. But then disadvantages are that you don't get any party XP bonuses, and higher tier maps may be more challenging at the start for a solo player. And then on the other hand, for group leveling, advantages are that you can do faster map clearing with an optimized team, You can also do rotations with friends or strangers, which reduces material cost. You also gain XP bonuses in a party based on the number of members. And finally, you can spread out in the campaign zones to quickly complete the side objectives. But then for the downsides, you get that potential delay when waiting on others in the group. You also get less freedom to pursue your own goals at any time. And finally, your group progression can be affected by under-level members. So, in PoE 2, the max level is 100. The game focuses more on gear and character optimization than just leveling. So, while reaching level 100 is a significant milestone, you'll also need top-tier equipment to take on the most challenging endgame content. And that's why following a leveling guide to maximize your XP gain through the campaign and endgame maps is essential. In general, there are two core progression systems, the character level and the skill gem level. Skill gems have varying level caps depending on their type, so 4, 5, 6 or even 20. And upgrading your skill gems is crucial for increasing your character's effectiveness. By progressing through these levels, you'll unlock abilities and gain access to powerful passive and active skills, allowing you to fine-tune your character's playstyle, which are known as builds. And these will play a huge role not only in the early stages of progression, but also throughout the whole game. The main campaign in PoE 2 consists of 6 acts. Based on initial playthroughs and my own experience, each act usually takes between 1 or 2 hours in the easiest difficulty to complete for experienced players, or from 3 to 4 for newer players. But of course, all of this will depend on how thoroughly you explore side areas, how many enemies you engage with, and whether you're rushing through or taking your time. Upon completing the campaign, players are typically around level 65 or 70, which sets the stage for progressing into the endgame content. Unlike other games, the progression from 70 to 100 in PoE 2 is slow and grind heavy, especially without optimized strategies, and usually this could take players anywhere from 50 to 100 or even more hours. Before we can talk further about the quickest ways to level and get the best gear, we first have to understand the difference between softcore and hardcore leveling. So, leveling in softcore mode is less punishing compared to the hardcore. In softcore, when you die, you can respawn at your hideout or the last waypoint you visited. In contrast, the hardcore is far more challenging. That means the end of your character's progression, forcing you to start a new character from the scratch. This is why hardcore players need to be extra cautious, as losing a high-level character can be incredibly frustrating. For 99% of the players, I recommend to start your first game in the softcore, aka the normal mode, as hardcore is just way too punishing, and I can assume that every time you die you don't want to start from the beginning. But no matter which one you choose, the process of leveling from 1 to 70 is relatively straightforward, as it follows all the other games, as an introduction to the game and the first milestone that needs to be completed to access the endgame content. So if you focus on completing all the side quests that grant you skill points, then also if you acquire your ascendancy points and progress through the acts effectively, then reaching level 70 should not be too challenging. However, there are still few tips and tricks that I found out to be quite useful in my first playthrough. So first off, stay 3 levels below the level zone. For maximum experience gain, I recommend to try to stay around 3 levels below the zone level while progressing. This will ensure that you come across weaker enemies and can farm them much quicker, thus making you stronger and giving yourself easier time to then challenge the tougher enemies. Second, check vendors for upgrades. Every time I visit town, I check vendors for potential gear upgrades, especially for weapons and movement speed boots. This will again allow me to progress my character bit by bit, so then in return I can kill enemies quicker. And especially if it's your first time playing, coming across new enemies might be very challenging, so getting the maximum out of your character can really save you in these situations and not make your mistakes that punishing. Then third, I recommend to use strong skill gems. You need to opt in for skill gems that don't require many links and are effective for clearing mob groups. Some strong early gems include Fire Trap, Frost Blades or Explosive Trap, but to be honest, any skill gem or its upgrade will be better than none. And then finally, don't go overkill on links. During early leveling, having a 4 link is often enough for most skills, so focus on gear with decent life and resistance, rather than maximizing your skill links after the 4 mark. Next up we have the endgame leveling, which starts from about level 65 to 70 and will last all the way to 100. And this is where the grind becomes more intense. But as I've said, by following a structured plan, it will help you to progress much quicker. So first, you need to understand a term called the League Starter build. This is a build/setup which is very beginner friendly and is focused on starting with a reliable starter build that is good at clearing maps effectively and doesn't require expensive gear to function. In PoE 1, every once in a while the game would reset your progress, so then players came up with builds that focuses on leveling up quickly, without hard gear to acquire. So this is why after reaching level 70, I strongly recommend you to watch one of my videos for a starter build depending on your class and ascendancy. Second, you need to optimize your Atlas tree. I personally tailor my Atlas tree to focus on progressing through the maps as quickly as possible, and I mainly aim to unlock a tier 16 maps. Maps are one of the main types of endgame content, as by placing them in a map device, maps can be consumed to create a randomized instance in which monsters can be fought. Like equipment, they come in normal, magic, rare and unique rarities, and can have their unique special affixes, which make them more difficult, but also increase their potential rewards. Maps can also have quality, which can be improved with the cartograph's chisels, and you can unlock mapping by entering the Val Ziggurat and speak to the Doriani to unlock access to the map device. This will occur around level 65, after you beat the final boss of the Act 3 on the Cruel difficulty. Next we have obtaining Waystones. You want to unlock all Waystones for your Atlas as early as possible to scale your map tiers and enable higher level content. You can use Waystones to explore the Atlas. These are craftable and single use, but don't worry because you will get plenty of them as rewards for killing monsters and completing endgame activities. Each location has different monsters, and one in every 4 zones is marked with a special boss icon, which means that it contains a challenge against a deadly boss. Initially, you will drop tier 1 Waystones, but higher level monsters have a chance to drop the next tier, scaling all the way to 16. Like with the most things in PoE 2, you can use a variety of currency items to craft your Waystones, and essentially crafting a Waystone will increase its danger and rewards. Then the fourth endgame tip is to start juicing your maps. And by this I mean that you want to improve your maps by adding extra monsters, increasing mob density, and using scarabs, sectants and other methods to boost the number of mobs you kill per map. The Atlas of Worlds is an ever-expanding map, but you only get one attempt for each node. This means that if you fail a dangerous node during your exploration, you will need to find another way to get to your desired goal. To enter the zone, you will need a special item called the Waystone. These are craftable and drop with specific tier attached to them, which makes area more dangerous and more rewarding. You can also use another consumable, tablets, on precious towers to further customize the content you run. For example, you can add the breach tablet to add more breaches to your maps and make them more rewarding. These tablets are self-reinforcing, so the more tablets you use, the more tablets you drop for that mechanic. And during your exploration, you may find zones with special encounters. The first one is called bosses, and these are very challenging and rewarding. Then the next zone is the precursor towers. These will reveal a large area and allow you to buff surrounding zones by using tablets. Next we have the League mechanic, which is a unique endgame encounter that I've made an entire video on, so check it out. Then next we have the Beast Corruption, which is a special zone with the corrupted modifiers. Then also we got Nameless Seer, which offers one unique item for free. Then also we have cities, in which you can find specific items hidden within the city. And then finally we have the special mobs like the Untamed Paradise, which gives a large amount of experience or other unique rewards. Then my fifth leveling tip is that we have to start improving your build. So to progress quicker, you want to focus on farming currency and upgrading your build to increase the speed and survivability. Efficient farming means faster leveling, so after getting to a decent stage in your League starter build, you then want to transition into something better and more longer lasting, which is why I've made and will keep making new build videos for every single setup and playstyle. So if you're interested in that, then just scroll through my channel and you will find what you're looking for. And then finally, my last suggestion is to grind higher tier maps or rotations. The fastest way to gain experience is through running high density maps, or alternatively join a 5-way Legion carries or Chayula Breachstone rotations for fast XP gain. At this point there are a wide variety of methods available to level up, but choosing the one that fits your playstyle and resources is the key to success. Based on my experience and previous POE endgame strategies, we can deduct that 5A carries in Legion encounters, Breach Towns, and/or Coward's Trial maps will remain some of the fastest ways to level in POE 2. However, if the meta changes, I will of course make an updated video. So let me introduce you to my favorite method of leveling, which is the 5A Legion carries. Here the density of the monsters is extremely high, and with the help of an arrow bot, the carry player can clear the instance while AFK and gain experience. By doing this, you can minimize the time spent grinding experience. So if you get someone to carry you, then you can farm currency for about 15 to 20 hours to then pay the carry player. And then you can spend 10 to 12 hours AFKing in these 5A rotations, and this will quickly level you all the way to 100. So then in my few last final thoughts, leveling in Path of Exile 2 will demand careful planning and efficiency, especially as you approach higher levels. By using group play, leveraging efficient farming strategies, and continuously upgrading your gear, you can minimize the grind and reach level 100 much faster than if you were just attempting the journey alone. However, both of them have their disadvantages and advantages. So for example, if you choose the solo level, then you can level at your own pace without reliance on others. You can also then complete most activities without requiring to wait or coordinate with other players. You will also gain more loot while leveling. But then the disadvantages are that you don't get any party XP bonuses, and higher tier maps may be more challenging at the start for a solo player. But then on the other hand, for group leveling, advantages are that you can do faster map clearing with an optimized team. You can also do rotations with friends or strangers, which will reduce material cost. You also gain XP bonus in a party based on the number of members. And finally, you can spread out in the campaign zones to quickly complete the side objectives. But then the downsides are that you get potential delay when waiting on others in the group. You also get less freedom to pursue your own goals at any time. And finally, your group progression can be affected by under-leveled members. Next, let's take a look at what gear does on a basic level, and what type of stats should you look for when choosing what items to keep or disregard. In POE 2, there are 10 gear slots, or 9 if you're using a two-handed weapon. Additionally, players can equip up to 5 flasks and allocate cluster or normal jewels into the passive skill tree to further enhance their character. Then furthermore, gear is also divided into several categories, including weapons, helmets, body armor, gloves, boots, and accessories like the necklaces, rings, and belts. So here's my very generalized rule of thumb that all classes and ascendancies can follow regarding the gear. So for body armor, gloves, and helmet, you want to look for defensive mods such as life, resistances, and increases to defensive modifiers such as evasion, armor, and energy shield. But attributes can also be useful. Then second, we have the boots. For them, increased movement speed is the most desirable mod, as it is the easiest place to acquire this important stat. Increased movement speed will allow you to maneuver around the battlefield more quickly, and will also increase the speed of your dodge roll. Other useful mods include life, movement speed, resistances, and attributes. Then next we have rings, and they are an excellent source to gain a large amount of resistances and attributes, freeing up mod slots on other gear pieces for other stats you may want. Life is also desirable on rings, but so are modifiers that fill in the gaps on your build, such as the accuracy rating, mana, damage to attacks, or attack and cast speed. Then as far as amulets go, they are another great source of attributes, resistances, and life, but also some more offensive modifiers such as critical strike chance, increased critical damage bonus, or mods that increase elemental damage to spells and attacks. Then also we have belts, which are often reserved for more defensive modifiers such as life and resistances. And finally, for weapons, you want to aim for damage or other useful utility mods that improve your offensive capabilities. And finally, for weapons, of course, damage or other useful utility mods that improve your offensive capabilities are the main stats to look for. So for example, a witch could find a scepter that hugely increases her spirit, allowing her to summon a larger undead army, which directly improves her ability to take down enemies. Or then a warrior, on the other hand, would likely want a mace, with more traditional weapon mods that increase his physical damage.